You'll note the headlines from the Wall Street Journal. We're failing at math and science, a need for an educated workforce. By the way, these are 15-year-old headlines. So the American public school is failing. COVID lockdowns, critical race theory have been an important part of promoting school choice. I mean, if you look around the country, you have third graders that can't read in abundance. It's pathetic in spite of the fact that we spend 40% more than developed countries around the world, and our results are not as good. The status quo for black students is not good. 1 in 6 students is proficient in math and science in the 3rd and 8th grade. The good news, this has been a banner year for school choice. More than a dozen schools have expanded school choice so students can escape from government schools. Providing excellent schools of choice is important to development of entrepreneurial and skills necessary for a complex modern world. Small business is one of the main victims of a poor school system. But the good news is school choice is going to make a profound difference over time for these small businesses. In 1998, I founded a public charter school in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and I just did a little math on it. In 25 years, we've processed over 3,000 students through the 3rd grade, and everyone can read. And we do it using direct instruction, which, by the way, is not newfangled. It's 50 years old. So what it does is it proves that these students can be educated. More recently in Richmond, we did a model of inner city students, 12 students from the most difficult conditions in the inner city, and they can all read and they've all done well when they're in a good school. So these opportunities are not only critical for our society, they're also critical to every one of those individuals so they have an opportunity at the American way. Now, many of you know vocational education was jettisoned years ago, and now we are starved at every level for individuals that have vocational skills. In 2007, I founded the Thales Academy based on the idea that we could produce a very high quality education using direct instruction and classic curriculum. By the way, classic curriculum is now in vogue around the country. And we have definitively proved that you can provide a very good education at low cost. We all know that the public school refrain is, we need more money. And after more money, we need more money. And it's proven that is not a solution. We need great teachers, we need good leaders, and we need to afford parents the opportunity to have choice for their children. We're going to begin and the last comment was, what will make private schools good in the long term is competition. The only real governor in our society is competition, and it'll last forever. Regulations have proven to be not effective. We're going to begin our questioning with Governor Ducey, who can explain Arizona's school choice and what the impact is for your state and how difficult it was to get it done.
Well, thank you, Bob, and it's great to be here talking about this issue because I think this is the single biggest issue at the state level that can make the largest difference. And I was lucky to have a Secretary of Education that felt the same way. Arizona had been working on school choice since 1994. Actually, before we are going to talk about the accomplishment that can change everything, Arizona was the best in the nation at choice. We had 525 charter schools. Everybody knows here a charter school is a public school with private management that's open to all. Those schools contain 220,000 students, 20% of Arizona's school children, and if you took just that sector, that was the #1 performing state in the nation. So we knew there was a dramatic difference, and one of the schools we were talking about were the Great Hearts Academies, where if Jack, Joe, and Sam Ducey were in kindergarten when Great Hearts didn't exist, that's where I would have sent them. These are schools that are more rigorous, have higher discipline and require parental involvement. There's dozens of these campuses in Arizona, yet they have an 11,000 kid wait list. So the parents are speaking. They want this for their children. And one of the reasons I ran for governor was universal educational savings accounts. It's where you could take your taxpayer dollars and go wherever you want. We passed that in 2017. It was referred to the voters, and we lost. The voters were not yet ready for it, even though the legislature was. Milton Friedman said a long time ago, in a crisis, people will look for the ideas that are lying around. And the crisis that we had post-2017 was COVID. Parents saw the lack of rigor that was happening in their school. They saw some of the things that were being presented to their children in online learning in some of the lesson plans. So we passed a larger package of universal educational school choice for every kid. So every kid in Arizona, regardless of background or where they are currently in school, can take their taxpayer dollars and go to the school of their choice. We were the first in the nation to get it done. It took all 8 years of the governorship to get it done, and now that law has passed in 9 other states. Texas is on the 1-yard line, and this will change education going forward in the United States forever. One thing I want to say about this, so getting it over the finish line is a real success. What's important after that is to make sure that we have success with it, that there's accountability, that there's transparency, and there's fidelity to what we want happen in education, like reading at grade 3, as well as all of the other choices that are there. So I do think we can look at this as a big success. School spending at the state level is the equivalent of what defense spending is at the federal level. This is the #1 line item that we have. This can reform our K-12 education system. It can really renew our communities too, because it does bring parents together because they have a say in their schools. A lot of good things are happening here, and I think another 1,000 flowers will bloom over the next decade. If you have a Republican governor and you have an opportunity in your chambers, this should be the thing you're talking to your governor about. Now is the time. We want to seize the day and take advantage of this for all 50 states.
Governor Ducey, now we're having more and more school choice, but we still have just vast opposition. So we have unions and Democrats and other groups who want to roll back school choice. How can we prevent them from doing that?
Well, this is the biggest opponent at the state level are these teachers' unions. And I've heard the secretary ask before about shutting down the Department of Education. And I want you to know that her idea of block granting all the dollars back to the states pro rata effectively does that. And then you're going to have a Secretary of Education that goes out and promotes best practices. And I think that idea of us talking about education at the federal level, but bringing the innovation with the laboratories of democracy at the state level is the way to move this forward. Unfortunately, this is a partisan issue right now. School choice did not start out that way. It was Michael Bloomberg and the city of New York and Superintendent Shapiro that were some of the first champions of charter schools. But because the Democrats are so beholden at the state level to the teachers union, they have ceded this opportunity to us. I want to see universal school choice in all of our states. I think the opportunity right now are in these red states, and I think you'll have a lot of parents, just like the representative pointed out, that really don't pay attention to politics day to day. They vote in the presidential race, but they're busy. And they're trying to educate their kids, and they're trying to raise their family, and they're trying to buy the groceries. And they'll find out that this is available in Arizona and say, why isn't it available in my state? Much like during COVID, when people saw the Catholic school kids going to school, and their kids in the public school, sometimes right next door, weren't going in, saying, why isn't this happening at our school? That this is something that really, if we make it such a political consequence that the Democrats continue to vote against this very good idea and life-affirming idea for families and kids, that we can have this in all 50 states in very short order. And today is really the opportunity. Folks in the room that are my age or older will remember a guy named Roger Bannister. He was the first individual to break the 4-minute mile. People thought it was impossible to run that fast. Well, once Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, thousands of people since have done the same thing. It was really a mindset. And I think for us to believe that we can't somehow, at some point, force either Democrat politicians to register Republican or to change their thinking on this and say to the teachers union, we're going to stop getting wiped out in these races, that this can be done. And this is really just with the people showing up. And I think you can see these green shoots in some of our urban areas where moms like Janelle Wood and our representative here today that are saying this is not right and we want to fix this. And when you get in these rooms, you can really make the case. You can see in the room that you're winning the room over. Oftentimes you can win the majority of the room, but you're leaving with 30, 40% of that room, and then the word of mouth spreads and people start to talk, and that's how you get positive incremental change in large chunks in this country.
Thank you. A quick follow-up question for Secretary DeVos. Pretty much any pedestrian in the country knows that public schools have failed us. That's universal. At the same time, many parents believe that public schools should be just as good as private Christian homeschoolers, but they're not because they're centralized in management. How can we disabuse them of that? I have parents say, well, it's the parents' fault if they're not successful. Well, no, it's not the parents' fault if they don't have a good teacher or they don't have good curriculum. But somehow that's been implanted in their heads. How can we disabuse voters? This is nonsense. America's all about choice for everything except schools and medicine.
That's right. Well, again, I think that parents have awakened to the fact that they have not had the kind of choices they thought they had within the public system, within the traditional system. And I think that the successful implementation of these statewide education savings account policies in a number of states and the resulting creativity and options and choices that families are going to have as a result are going to really compel families to think differently about the nostalgic view of the traditional schools versus what the reality is. And I see it in the states that have had education freedom policy in place longer than other states where creative people are providing the kinds of settings for kids to participate in that are opening families' eyes to what could be different. And I think about, one example, my husband started a charter high school in Michigan that's focused on aviation. And it's such a great convening idea. And they have, hundreds on wait lists. But the notion that you go to school and all of your classes are oriented in some way around the theme of aviation, we should have dozens, if not hundreds, of those kinds of opportunities for every other kind of profession and area. And that will happen the more these education freedom policies are implemented.
Thank you very much. Before we go to the last question, I wanted to mention that in many cases, and I've interviewed a lot of public school teachers, they're not given good curriculum. They can choose their own curriculum. They can choose the way they teach it. So you don't really have standards. So you could have a great teacher and great curriculum, and you could have a bunch of nothing throughout the system. One of the things that Thales has done, we just released a book called The Thales Way. And the Thales Way defines what we think K-12 should be. Public school system should have done this 100 years ago, at least 50 years ago, or even 10 years ago, but they haven't done it. If you think about direct instruction, it's 50 years old. The Federal Department of Education recognized it as the best way of teaching reading, math, phonics, reading comprehension. The public schools consistently will not use direct instruction. It makes no sense at all. So it's not a matter of lack of good curriculum, lack of knowledge of how to teach reading. It's a simple refusal to use good standards. I think that has to be very clear to people. I want to go back to Heidi Ganal. You started the very successful Camp Bow Wow. You faced all the challenges of small businesses. Talk about the impact of people you employ and the K-12 educational system.
Well, it's the reason that I got involved in politics, because as I was growing Camp Bow Wow, I started to see the ability for my employees to read or put together proposals, have good collaborative conversations with their colleagues was waning. And I was like, what is going on? So I joined the business school board at University of Colorado and decided to really find out for myself. And at the end of the day, being a regent was really important. I enjoyed the time in higher education, but I saw that the real problem was in K through 12, and that our children weren't learning the basic blocking and tackling that they needed to be successful in the world of business. And so I started to get involved in opening charter schools through the Barney Charter School Initiative out of Hillsdale, and we opened one and then a few more in Colorado. And I would walk into the classroom at these schools, and the kids were lit up. They loved being there. They loved learning. It was a totally different dynamic than I was used to seeing in the traditional classroom, my own kids' classrooms included. And they loved learning. They loved learning. And that is one of the key things that I think is missing in our education system too, mostly the public schools, is that kids are just, they go, they clock in, they put their time in the seat, but they aren't learning to love education. They aren't learning to find their passion, their hope, and I truly believe that's part of the mental health problem that we're facing. So after the election last year, I kind of said, what can I do that's the most impactful thing to help this country turn around? And I truly believe that we can save America one student at a time. And I'm working now with a group called ACE Scholarships, and we will give out over $50 million in private scholarships in 14 different states this year. And those are mostly blue-leaning states, right, where they don't have ESAs, like Arizona and Florida. And so there's two paths right now that are happening in the education space. In red-leaning states, or red states, they are going towards the education savings accounts and passing those and doing a great job. We've got Arkansas now, Mississippi and Louisiana, I think, are headed there. ACE Scholarships is now the program manager, was just announced on Friday for Utah's new ESA program. And so there's that path. We've got to drive as hard as we can to take this opportunity to grow the ESAs. And then on the bluer states, we've got to provide private scholarships for these families that want to get their kids out of the public schools. And I think doing those both at the same time is the most effective way forward. Now, Lisa Nelson's out in the audience with Alec. Lisa, here you are. Hi. Lisa, can you talk a little bit about the Education Alliance that's being put together with job creators and ACE and Alec and some amazing opportunities and organizations to really drive this effort?
I'm glad you asked. That's so great. And this whole
wasn't
panel,
set up at all.
it's totally everything that you have all said, and the 30 years that you've all been working on this, kind of lands us in this place where we are right now. Heidi started mentioning the states that have passed the ESAs, and I'm just going to go down them just very quickly because it's important and it's powerful. It happened in the last 2 years. Started by West Virginia and Arizona in 2022, and then Iowa, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Florida, North Carolina, Indiana, Ohio, and Utah. And we heard earlier from Governor Ducey about this kind of competition among the governors. I keep saying, as long as they are competing against each other, we're going to continue to get these ESAs going. So we are pitting one governor against the other. And it doesn't happen just through the governor's office. It has to start in the legislative body. So ALEC is the American Legislative Exchange Council. It's complicated, but we are the state legislators that, when Governor Ducey said it passed by one vote in the Arizona House and one vote in the Senate, those are the ALEC legislators that are doing that. When COVID was happening, Steve Moore, I think he's here somewhere, there he is, Committee to Unleash Prosperity, Alfredo, Job Creators Network, Freedom Works, and ALEC got together and started a coalition called Save Our Country. And we really rallied the troops to try to give support to the governors who were going down there. I'm so glad that we were reminded that Secretary DeVos had gone into North Carolina, because those were the kinds of things that we were seeing and then championing and then saying, you've got to open these states. So we are starting the Education Freedom Alliance. You see it up on the screen. That is essentially going to take that same model of a bunch of different organizations that have different strengths to try to get ESAs passed. We're going to start something called 25 by 25, which is 25 states to pass those ESAs by the year 25. It's very ambitious, and I think I've got Lee Habib here who's going to talk a little bit about the campaign.
Thank you, thank you. You know, John Solomon talked a little bit about what happened with tax cuts, and a campaign happened in that year that Job Creators Network put together, where we went out to all the big influencers, Rush Limbaugh, all the Salem guys, all the podcasters, some of the local influencers, and we bought ad time with them. It represented 60 million conservatives. It wasn't a terrifically large buy because it was radio and podcast and digital. And we put the same message with the same URL for all of them. And they all agreed contractually to do this. And our problem on our side is we're always 18 different people are messaging in 18 different ways. Well, within 60 days, with the same script, all of the hosts were also asking Paul Ryan to come on the show to talk about why he was doing tax reform and not tax cuts. And what do you know? The next thing you know, he's doing tax cuts. The pressure that they were able to, that the conservatives were able to put on these legislators was overwhelming to them. So we want to use the same exact tool with this. We've talked to every major host, every major podcaster. They've agreed to do this. They'll read an ad an hour every day during the legislative sessions from January to March. And we believe that it's easier to join a parade than start a parade. And so ultimately we want to invite the governors on who've passed ESAs. And then we want to offer that same opportunity for the red state governors who have not. And then create the air cover for all of those rural, and you know the problem, Governor Ducey, all those rural Republicans who worry about their, quote, superintendents. My superintendents, they say. We're going to let them know there are more constituents than there are superintendents. So know that that's the plan. We have an organized proposal. We'll leave it down. It's very reasonable, and we believe 25 by 25 could change the country. Parent power is the key to this, and that's how we're going to message this. The word freedom, Secretary DeVos, is so important. Freedom is key, and choice is not good. Freedom is better, and ultimately, it's about parent power, and we want to put the power into the hands of the parents, and particularly the mothers. Thanks.
We're going to now take questions from the audience. Make sure somebody brings you a microphone.
Thank you. Raul Lopez from Latinos for Tennessee. I do want to add that Tennessee does have ESA too. We're in our two biggest cities, and we're trying to do it statewide. Wanted to ask you all's opinion. We are in the middle of a study of possibly ending federal funding in our state for education. I just wondered what your all's opinion on that. We've done so well physically that we can do that, and just wanted to cut out the federal government in education in the state level. What do you all think?
I think it's a great idea.
I would be very interested to see a state take the lead on doing just that. You know, the Department of Education takes the money appropriated by Congress, spins it around in that building for months and months amongst hundreds and thousands of bureaucrats, and then spews it back out to the states after taking a big cut. And it always goes with all kinds of red tape and strings attached. And so if a state were to be able to take the step of refusing federal funds and able to go it on their own, I think it would be a really important step and a good learning for everyone else to be able to you know, set free from all of the strings that Washington sends.
Raul, I always push back on my friends in DC and on the press. There is no federal funding. it's all taxpayer funding. It is all owed back by the people in this room, our kids and our grandkids. So any opportunity we have to reduce spending, especially when it's showing no return on investment, we should do it. It's a great idea, and I would love to see Bill Lee lead the way on that.
Another question? There's,
Drew Hearn, I'm with Young Republicans. I'm from Pennsylvania, and I think this is one of the best panels because I'm just finishing out my senior year in high school. I wanted to ask, we're seeing multiple public schools and even sponsored activities by these schools, such as the YMCA does a program, Youth in Government, being hijacked by the left. How in blue states and swing states like Pennsylvania do we fight this, especially when these programs are getting lots of money from large liberal donors? Thank you.
I would start by saying people need to say what's important to them and not let other people say what's important to them. I think right now what's happening is the left is really loud saying this is important to me, but the right is not saying we value family, we value religion, we value education. So until people start not being afraid to say what's important to them and not being afraid to be canceled, we will continuously have this problem.
Well, you guys, I think that it's very important for our faith community to stand up and speak out right now and get engaged in this culture war. I talk about how 64% of Coloradans consider themselves Christians, yet if you look at the way they don't vote their values. And a third of Christians across this country don't vote. They just don't vote, and pastors are terrified to get involved and engaged and encourage their congregations. They don't have to say vote Republican or Democrat, they just have to say vote your values. And so the church community is a really integral part of this, and they have different programs for youth and different ways to support the people in their churches and communities. Get busy, go bigger, build, get strong, and start speaking up. I think that's a really important thing that has to happen right now, and I would encourage all of you to read the book Letter to the American Church by Eric Metaxas about the similarities to Nazi Germany and what happened then and what's happening now and how pastors didn't speak up then and what would have happened if they did.
Hang on one second, Bob. Drew, you pointed out that this is one of the best panels that you've seen, and I just want to point out what a bright young man you are. But I also want to say I want you to have success in Pennsylvania, and I don't want you to use a blue state as an excuse not to have that success. And I'm going to speak politically here, and politics is the art of the possible on how you get this done. I think we lose if we pit ourselves against public schools. Most of the people, or a lot of the people that are in public schools, think their public school's okay. It's the public school down the road or across town. That's the failing public school. If we look for that option, that opportunity, that choice, that charter school, that's the way to begin. And that's really the option for these young people and their families that want to get out of these programs. And just like Great Hearts with dozens of campuses in Arizona and an 11,000 kid wait list, there will be demand. And then politicians will respond. If you wait until you have the perfect Republican governor and both chambers, you'll be waiting decades. You should be looking for those options politically, and I think charter schools are the best first option, and expanding those, importing a great model like a Great Hearts or a Basis, or founding your own classical model, or bringing Bob Luddy's model in there, that type of thing, and then all of a sudden that will replicate and it will grow, and you'll win the argument, and then you'll win the vote.
Thank you. In the 1940s, Friedrich Hayek wrote a book called The Road to Serfdom, and in that book, he talked about why the worst get to the top. He's talking about politicians. In the case of the Pennsylvania governor, committed to school choice, killed it in the end. They need to be called out loudly in public, just like the left overwhelms us with all their propaganda. We have another question in the back there.
Hi, this is more a comment, but hopefully it'll let you riff on it a bit. I don't know how many people here have seen the film Miss Virginia. It's about Virginia Walden Ford's fight for school choice in Washington, D.C. This film, when it aired on BET TV, was so popular that BET TV is now partnering with an organization, it's a libertarian organization called Moving Picture Institute. And BET, because of the popularity of Miss Virginia, is now partnering with this libertarian organization to produce more films. But I think nothing speaks more to the popularity of school choice than this example. And you may want to comment on that.
It's a great film. I recommend it to everyone.
A loud voice is imperative, is
Yes.
the message. Another question?
Hi, appreciate the excellent panel here. I understand the logic of moving everything from the federal government to the state governments, but why not even move it further, strict the whole way back to the parents, and just have a voucher system to begin with, that every parent gets a $10,000 voucher, and then they can spend it on any school they want, anywhere they want, and the government, both state and federal, is completely out of it. Wouldn't that lead to massive competition where all the schools would be trying to be as good as they possibly could be to get that money from the parents that they controlled? And wouldn't it also keep the costs down because parents would have a limited amount of funds that they would spend on whatever school they thought was the best one for their child?
You have stated the solution. Comments?
I was going to say that that is basically what we have in Arizona, except you have to opt in. So all you have to do is raise your hand and ask for it. I do think it's a good idea. I think you also have to understand in a state the size of Arizona, we have 1.5 million kids that are already in a school. Now, thankfully, nearly 100,000 have raised their hand and say, we want something new. But we also want to make sure, just like we saw during the COVID years, that we don't have this mass disruption. I think that we can make this migration where parents will make the choice to the better school. And the other thing this is great about, Bob, is every time the left says we need more money, well, we'll get you more money because it's going to go to the parent. Yeah, it's the equivalent of giving the parent more freedom of choice around this, and the parents hold the schools accountable. But the idea is to get it done universally for everyone in your state, and then to start to market and sell it and opt parents in. And this is a pretty good clip to not even have it there a year and to be nearly 100,000 families. A lot can happen in a short period of time.
So school choice actually saves money and increases quality.
Yes.
That's a heck of a deal. Another question.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I ran for governor of Illinois, as you may know, and I've, my biggest opponent probably was the teachers' unions of the state. I mean, I was vocal, very vocal about them, not just their school boards and the problems we have there, but our unions are tyrannical unions. They're not just normal unions. When I'm here in Florida, other parts of the country, there's unions. Nothing like the tyrannical unions that we have in Illinois, New York, California, some of these other places. Has there been any roadmap of success in any way from an organization that might, that might rise up just to call out how crazy they are, how communist they are, in my opinion, without it having to be a guy running for governor, somebody running for a state rep, because you can't win in states like Illinois when you call them out. I mean, it's just impossible. So I ask, is there any organization, Betsy, that you've seen that's risen up to call out the unions, because they're the trucks, they're the biggest problem we have in states like Illinois.
I would just say that the American Federation for Children, the organization that I was with before going to Washington, started this work many years ago, and it was when we started getting involved in the politics of individual state legislative races, as well as governor's races, that we started seeing the benefit and the progress around getting policies implemented. It is a block and tackle effort, and it has to be every state legislative race, but it's tougher in states like Illinois where there's such one-party control. But it comes down to really doing the blocking and tackling of politics in those state legislative races.
We are timed out. We thank you, the panel, for great comments. Thank you for being very attentive.